So, hi everyone. We will take several minutes and then start.
Hello. Oh, okay. Hi. If people in the back can hear me, we're going to start in like 6 minutes. So grab your food, find a seat over here so that you can see my face. Thank you. Hello. Hi. We're gonna get started. So if everyone can take their seat. Okay. Hello. All right. Okay. I'll let people get more pizza, but whenever they're ready. Okay. Right. Great. So hello. Welcome to our February 2026 Chicago Ruby Meetup. First event of 2026. Hooray. As a reminder, we aim to meet every first Wednesday of the month. We want to thank Tasty Trade and the folks of Tasty Trade for letting us use their lovely space and for being such a gracious host. With that, actually, I don't know if Hannah's around. She wanted to give a couple words about Tasty Trade. Yeah. Hey, sorry. Yeah, we're getting started. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Maybe. I thought people could hear me from out there. Okay. Yeah. All right. We'll just take two. All right. If you're ready, feel free to take a seat. We're getting started. Okay. So welcome to our February 2026 Chicago Ruby Meetup. Again, as a reminder, we aim to meet every first Wednesday of the month. Want to thank Tasty Trade and the folks of Tasty Trade for letting us use their lovely space and for being such a gracious host. With that, I will hand it off to Hannah, who will tell us more about Tasty Trade. Oh, and Colleen, sorry. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Hannah. I've been an engineer at Tasty Trade for 5 years now. Just pass it back and forth. We're good.
I'm Colleen. I've been here just a few months. Just a reminder about the space. We have bathrooms just out the hall here, a gender neutral bathroom further down the hallway. You guys all got pizza and we have the soda machine. Any snacks you guys need as well. So Tasty Trade, it's an online trading platform. We have web, desktop, and mobile options. And we really specialize in derivatives trading. So that's like options and futures. But we also offer stocks, ETFs, crypto trading. So we're a brokerage built by traders for traders. And we want to help individuals take control of their trading. We have a lot of resources for learning, both through the platform as well as through a streaming show called Tasty Live. And Hannah's going to tell us a little bit about an open role we have.
Indeed, Hannah is. Okay, so we have an open role for Ruby engineer in Chicago. We have a new internal tools team. So you'll be working with a lot of our employees here, accounts team members, helping them make tools to make their lives easier, understand trading details, open accounts. Some perks about here, we cater lunch every day and Lou Malnati's is regular on the menu. As to myself, I am on the customer acquisition and identity management team. We just make sure accounts get opened and make sure people are who they say they are. A lot of fraud management.
And I'm on the order handling and ledger team. And so I've gotten to help build some new features like recurring investments and new order types like contingent on price orders. Chris, who probably took you up in the elevator, it leads our Tasty Trade app. He's the CTO. We have Casey, our recruiter. And then, yeah, Lester's helping with IT. So we're all happy to talk to you guys if you're interested in working at Tasty. Oh yeah, then we have also red QR codes you can see like in the back. And so if you want to submit your resume, you can just submit it right through there. And make sure to answer the prompts. That one's for Casey. Yeah. All right, I think that's all. Oh yeah, and thank you so much to our Chicago Ruby organizers and the speakers tonight. All right.
Oh, thank you so much, Colleen and Hannah. Sorry. All right, next slide. So before we get started, I'm going to go through some quick housekeeping and announcements. First, join us for our future events. We will post our events on meetup.com as well as on Slack. Announcement, we have our own channel within the Ruby Central Community Slack. It's Chicago Ruby. And then we also have the Ruby channel within Chicago Tech Slack. These Slack channels will be a place for us to connect, as well as where Anton, Dan, or myself will post any announcements prior to our events. Reach out to me if you need an invite to any of these Slack channels. Oop. Okay. Missed a previous event or want to rewatch a talk? We have our 2025 and 2026 event recordings posted on our YouTube channel at Chicago Ruby Meetups. Feel free to give our channel and videos a like and subscribe. Yeah. Interested in hosting? Chicago Ruby is on the lookout for organizations willing to host our monthly meetings. If interested, reach out to Anton, Dan, or myself, and we can give you more info. Interested in speaking? We would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to me, Anton, or Dan for more information on speaking at Chicago Ruby. If you're interested in speaking but unsure what to talk about, or if you're interested in hearing a specific topic, we've compiled a list of potential topic ideas that members of the community are interested in learning more about. This QR code will send you to that list. Feel free to add your ideas on that Google spreadsheet. For moderation purposes, this Google spreadsheet is open for comments only, and admins like myself will add ideas from the comments onto the list. If you're interested in Chicago Ruby, either by hosting a different type of event or like a hack night, Cohen Coffee, collaboration with other groups, or through a sponsorship, we are so down. Reach out to me for more info on sponsorships. Yeah. Some job announcements. These companies have reached out to us to share the word that they are hiring. Prevail.ai has open positions for mid-level and senior full stack developers. Reach out to Dan Henselman for more info. Unfortunately, Dan is not here today, but you can reach him on Slack. Chime has open positions in their Chicago office for a senior level software engineer as well as a backend engineer. Reach out to Noel Rappin for more info. Vibes has an open senior software engineer role as well as a software engineer 2 role. They are hosting us next month in March, and we're super excited to check out their space. And then the Scion Group has an open software engineer role. Reach out to Crystal James for more information. Her email's over there. And also Tasty Trade is hiring. Reach out to any of these lovely folks in the back for more info. And then lastly, if you or your company are hiring and want to highlight your open positions at the next Chicago Ruby Meetup, feel free to reach out to Anton, Dan, or myself to get that set up for you. Almost done. All right. Last, join us next month. Vibes will be hosting our March meetup. It will be Wednesday, March 4th, 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. We have some great speakers lined up. Mike Dalton's coming from Philly to talk about intro to Hotwire, and then Jason Swett will be coming from Michigan. His topic, TBA, to be announced. You can RSVP for our March meetup on our meetup.com page. Then, with that, I am done talking and I will hand it off to Jeff. Yay, Jeff.
See if I can get Lester. Is there a way to start that, you know? You start at the beginning. Thank you. Very good. All right. Awesome. So my name is Jeff. A little bit of a different topic. I teach computer science at the University of Chicago. This is not a computer science talk. This is really a different kind of a non-technical talk a little bit about how to get more contentment and joy into your professional career. If that doesn't sound like it's your type of thing, then this talk is going to bring you down so much. So I'm just going to warn you, that's what this is kind of all about. I want to talk about the word learning. We use it a lot in computer science. We use it a lot in programming spheres. But what does it kind of really mean? And I've been told that in order, before you start to explain a topic, you want to show your credibility on your ability to talk about such a topic. So here's my credentials. I don't know anything about neuroscience or the learning sciences. I don't have a degree in education. I never learned French cooking. I never learned a lot of things. So everything I'm telling you is instead based on just empirical experience. So I've worked with a few thousand students over the last 15 years in a variety of capacities, in boot camps, university settings, and in industry. And I kind of took up a particular interest in actually how do we learn things? And that's what I just want to share a story about tonight. So you've probably heard that what we do as software engineers is actually solving problems, right? This is kind of a cliche that we've all heard. You know, you're not paid to code, you're paid to solve problems. And that's really the key to a successful career. That's really true. If solving problems is really what we are getting paid to do, how do we do that? You know, in theory, the idea is that we have to be learning all the time. If there was a problem that's already been solved, then they don't need me, right? The reason that we have software careers is because we're solving novel problems in a particular space that is unique for whatever reason in that space. Otherwise, they would just get something off the shelf and use it, right? The reason that we exist as programmers is to be learning something new and to figure something new out. But as a community in software, we don't really talk about learning, do we? We talk about frameworks and languages and programming, but how do we actually learn? No one ever taught me like how to do that. So that's kind of what I want to talk about and tell a story about here tonight. How do you learn something new? I mean, it's almost kind of a funny question to even ask. We just take it for granted. We've all gone through school. We've had jobs. We just really don't think about it too much. I'm one of those weirdos that actually wants to think about it a lot. Because here's the thing, we are not just going to learn something once and then be done, right? It's not like I can learn one thing and then someone's going to pay me forever to just do that one thing. We always have to be learning something new. So how many times are we going to have to do this? Like many times, like all the time, if we're choosing software as a career. Now, usually in my line of work as a developer, when I'm faced with doing kind of the same thing over and over and over again, right, what do we usually do in that case as software programmers? We don't usually like copy and paste that, hopefully in 20 places, right? We sort of had this whole dry principle, like, you know, let's make a library out of that, or let's make a framework out of that. We don't do that for learning, though. right? We tend to, every time we have a problem, we sort of have to figure that out kind of from scratch. And we may not have a repeatable process even for ourselves on how to learn something new. So I'm spending this year trying to talk to the community about a framework for learning. If learning really is central to our careers, then we should have a way to think about how we're doing that in a deliberate way of learning. So, here's a bunch of frameworks that most of the time we are told, here's what you should learn. And this is usually what we spend most of our hours working in. But again, if I go back to the beginning, if we're not paid for this, we're actually paid for solving a problem, then we're sort of missing out on something that can really be the engine for whatever we're doing, especially in this weird situation we have now with AI. And we're all worried about like what's going to happen and with a lot of uncertainty happening. I'm hoping that this talk will start to give you some peace of mind about our future. So if these are frameworks that we know about, I think we need a framework for learning. I call it the AHA map because I suck at naming things. So that's the name I'm just working with at the moment. And I just want to share a couple of stepping stones that are in this map overall. When we're trying to learn something that is non-trivial, which hopefully most of us are doing most of the day, right? We have a lot of levels of abstraction that we're dealing with, a variety of constraints, complex things. How do we begin to learn what to do? And you've heard a lot of cliches about this, and I want to reveal that they're mostly lies. I'm only going to do two. Let me just start with the first one. You've probably heard this phrase, right? You got a problem, divide and conquer. Break it into pieces. The reason that this lie is kind of nefarious is that it's actually pretty true, right? Whenever I have a problem in front of me that seems a little daunting, breaking that problem up into smaller pieces is essential, right? I think we've all done this, yes? Okay. So what's the problem here? The problem is that this is not enough for you to understand how to actually learn how to solve the problem. So let me kind of demonstrate what's going on here. I've had a few friends in my life that do not know baseball. They grew up in other countries, or I have just one friend of mine who's a goofball, and they never learned baseball. And if I tried to explain to somebody, we're at a baseball game and there's live action in front of us, and I want to try to explain it real quick. Imagine if I kind of tried it this way, right? Okay, here's what happens. The pitcher throws the ball. Batter tries to hit the ball, run around the bases. Okay, there's this thing called the infield fly rule, okay? Where the batter's automatically out if it's a pop-up and there's runners on first and second or the bases are loaded. And then I say, oh, by the way, a foul tip is a strike. Unless it's a third strike. Oh, a strike is a pitch over the plate. A ball is a pitch that's not a strike. Oh, yeah, and the strike is any pitch that is swung at and missed. Am I helping this person learn baseball at all? I think you can see the problem with like this. I divided up the problem. I broke it into pieces. But this order like doesn't help at all, right? I've given no sense of priority or order to my explanation. So let me show you a good example. I think most of you have heard of these Mars rovers. Like I think Curiosity is probably the most famous. They land this rover on Mars, and it actually drives around. No Google Maps, I guess, over there on Mars. It literally doesn't know what it's going to encounter over the other hill. How does it do this? So what if I were to explain it this way? Because that kind of ordering is no good. How do we drive across an unknown planet? First of all, I should tell you that the rover's got 6 wheels, and there are electric motors. Okay. It moves slowly, like super slowly. It's got to go a mile, but it's going an inch per second. there are solar panels that are going to provide power for those electric motors. And it's got some cameras to actually see where it's going. Okay, so I think at this point, you probably want to know more about it, but you're kind of getting the rough idea, right, of how in the world this thing is possible. It's because I probably have a decent ordering here of how to explain how a rover works, even on Mars. So ordering matters. One of the examples that I like to give, everybody know Bill Nye, I hope? Okay, otherwise this talk is not for you. But there was an episode that I saw a long time ago that I can't find on YouTube anywhere. But Bill Nye was at a beach with some of the kid actors. And they were at a beach and they had sand and they had a bunch of rocks and they had a glass jar. And the challenge was for the kids to get a bunch of sand and a bunch of rocks into this jar. And so they started out the way I would start out. You put the sand in and then you try to pile the rocks on top. And the rocks would always overflow. So what would the solution, after much trial and error, you dump all that stuff out. You first put in the rocks into the jar that fit. And they will actually, without the sand in there, they will actually fit below the rim. Then you pour the sand in, and the sand will just sort of find the nooks and crannies around the rocks and just sort of fill up. So you'll end up with something like this. Same amount of stuff, but you're fitting it because you put things into the correct order. The big rocks went first. That's my rule of thumb for how to order any sort of explanation of something new. If you want to try to learn about something new, like I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this AI jargon going on right now. There's like agents and skills and MCP server. Like I have a hard time learning what all these things are. But what's helped me is I don't try to learn everything at once about a topic. I just learn the big ideas first. The details, the exceptions, the odd cases, those can come later. You can fill those, that's the sand that can fill in later. Once you have the context and the main idea already in mind. And we can go into some of the neuroscience about that, but then we'd be here for a few hours. So my takeaway number one is just, when you're trying to learn something new, just get the big rocks first. Don't worry about learning every single detail about that thing. Here's the second line, and this is the one I'll close with. You probably heard something like this. Hey, if you want to learn something new, just do one rung at a time. It's like climbing a ladder. Just do one rung and then do the next one and then do the next one. And this one seemed true for me for a long time. And it was hard to really figure out why this didn't quite work for me. So let me try to explain it through some other metaphors. That slide is out of order. Oh, no, this is true. Okay, so the whole ladder analogy, at least it acknowledges, right, that there's an order involved. It isn't just put a bunch of rungs on the floor and then hope that you figure out the right order. The rungs are there. There's a ladder there for you to climb in a certain order. So that's good. But what's missing, and what took me years to discover working with a lot of students, the missing ingredient in that ladder idea is time. That's what sounds very orthogonal to that whole idea. But let me see if I can explain what I mean. So here is a lighthouse. When they need to change the light bulb at the top of the lighthouse, there's a service ladder that runs along the side of the lighthouse. You can sort of see it in the picture there, I hope. And if you need to get to the top, yeah, the ladder's there. You could do it. Let me sort of zoom in on that ladder a little bit. So you can easily get to that first rung, and in theory, you want to change the light bulb, just climb that ladder. And if you're not afraid of heights, then you're okay. And you can just go up one rung at a time. But this is not really how they usually will change a light bulb in a lighthouse. Most lighthouses, actually, if you could open them up, you'll see that inside there's a spiral staircase. Spiral staircase is a lot easier to climb than a straight up ladder, right? Where you just gotta go vertically up. That's the hardest way to climb up a lighthouse. If you had a spiral staircase, that's much easier to walk up, almost, right? This is my analogy for how to learn something that seems steep to you. Simply saying to yourself, oh, I'll just learn it one rung at a time, isn't enough because you're not giving yourself the notion of time. Let me try to explain. So with this spiral staircase here, you're starting at one point in the tower, and you're going to go around the steps, and you're going up as you climb the steps, but also you are going around. Okay, so imagine that the place that we're starting here, let me try to think of an example. Let's say you're new to Ruby on Rails, and you're learning about the models and the controllers. Let's say this stairway face represents models in Rails, let's say. The first thing you might learn about models is it's just a Ruby class, but it's supposed to represent something in the real world. And you might then also learn, oh, okay, it also is going to be backed by a database table. That's good enough. That's like the ground floor level of that staircase. To learn more about models, I would suggest you spiral. That is, go somewhere else. Learn about routes. Get comfortable, or routes, I don't know how you say. Get familiar with like the whole, like, what is a route? What is an HTTP verb? What is RESTful development? What are controllers about? Do a little bit of that. And by the time you've learned something, your brain has gotten into that, then you're going to come back around to the same spot, but higher up, and you can learn about models a little more. Validations, callbacks. What does a before save do? Why would I use that? Then you keep going around, learn a little more about Rails, maybe some initializers, configuration, I don't know, deployment, something. Then you come back around to models. Now you're pretty high up. Now you're ready to think about scopes and other things about models, right? If you try to learn about everything about models at once without the other context that you need to know why you would learn that, it's very hard to just scale that Lighthouse straight up. Is this making sense? A little bit? Okay. So this spiral staircase technique, part of the reason I say that time is the element is because you are going up, but you're giving your brain enough time away from it to really let your subconscious kind of settle it in, and time for you to really formulate the questions necessary so that the next time you come around to those models, you have a reason to learn the next thing. And that really unlocks a lot of learning. Cool? Okay. Now this is, I want to be kind of clear. This is different than what you may have heard of, something called spaced repetition. You guys heard of this term? Okay. Spaced repetition is something different, and I kind of don't like it, but there are certain cases where I guess it's okay. The reason that spiral staircase is different from just spaced repetition, because you might think, oh, you're just saying, learn about models and then come back to it later. What's the difference there? The difference is that we're elevating at the same time that we're coming around. So you're not just going in circles, you're also going up with the spiral staircase. With spaced repetition, you're sort of just repeating the same ideas. It's good for memorization. It's good for cramming for a test. It's not for learning. It's more about just trying to temporarily get your brain to memorize things. So big rocks first, spiral staircase. There's a whole bunch of other analogies that I've been working on that if you're interested, you can come talk to me or email me later. But eventually, hopefully by the summer, I'll actually have a series of essays that the community can hopefully benefit a little bit from to really get into, I think, this idea of learning. Because especially as we're facing changes in our own industry, it's important that we not feel tied to just whatever framework or language we've learned. Some people have asked me sort of for some references on other ways to kind of get into the space of how we think and how we learn. This book by Andy Hunt is amazing. It's very thin. It's the only reason I picked it up. I cannot read big books. Pragmatic Thinking and Learning. It doesn't assume that you're in a technical field, but if you are a programmer, it makes a lot of sense because he's a programmer as well. There was a famous TED Talk in 2013 by Sir Ken Robinson. I think it still stands as the #1 viewed TED Talk on ever. He's talking about the educational system in the US and what needs to change. Before that, I mean, I discovered it later, but Dan Meyer before that at a TEDx New York in 2010 did a wonderful 18-minute talk on how to rethink the math curriculum in the United States, which just blew my mind. So if you want other resources as well, I'm happy to, I could talk about this stuff forever. So let me just wrap up by kind of saying, just look at my notes here real quick. Yeah, I mean, look, we've all been on the other side of this, right? We've all been, just sort of like waiting for just the right blog post or just the right boot camp or just the right person to explain to us what we need to know in something that we are working in. I'm always pinging my friends like, hey, I read this thing on LinkedIn about AI. I have no idea what it is. Can you please try to explain it to me? And my friends are terrible explaining things, so it doesn't really help. But here's what changes when you get better at learning yourself. You stop becoming a consumer of other people's knowledge, right? We can start to become our own creator of our own experiences. When we are confident that we can learn something new, then those things which seemed like obstacles, like, oh, I don't know that thing or I don't know that, become opportunities. When you start to become self-confident that I can learn something new, I think I have some ideas on how to go about attacking this idea, then things start to open up. Things don't seem as scary. Things actually might start to seem fun to learn that next thing. That language that you've been curious about, but you've kind of put off, or a career pivot you've been thinking about, but you don't know how to get started. So when you feel confident that you can learn, then your curiosity starts to drive you. Your curiosity can become the vehicle for then getting into new avenues, new careers, new jobs, new hobbies. You have a reliable system for figuring things out. And in a time right now when there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going to happen, if you can feel confident that you're going to figure things out, wow, things aren't so scary, right? Right? If this is true, that always learning new things is the key to a successful career, which I think it is, then having your own system of learning that is personal to you and that you can rely on, that is freedom. Because we don't need to be worried about the next AI thing or the next change in our industry. We can learn whatever we need to learn to be able to stay and ride that wave. Make sense? Cool. Thank you very much. Happy to take questions. Thanks.
Any questions left?
Any questions at all? Go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
How does this connect to somebody's learning preference? So let's say I'm a kinetic learner. I guess, well, just a different way somebody can learn, whether it's audibly or whether, like I said, through kinetic or maybe through visually. Does it, do those resources kind of address those different ways that somebody learns and how they need to incorporate the learning strategies like that? Or are there different resources that you may have or that you can give for those different ways of learning?
Everybody hear the question, hopefully on Zoom. So that's a super interesting question. I think that students who have been better, let's say, at hearing instructions versus like they need to write it down, because I feel like when I write something, I don't know, I just learn it better. I don't think that changes any of the main principles of learning. The trick is, though, that what the mainstream advice that you're going to get, you're going to have to like read between the lines and like interpret, okay, what does that mean for me? If I'm like more of a kinetic learner and they're saying that, like I say, big rocks first, okay, then it could be that actually working with, like I have a rubber ducky at home. Does everybody have a rubber ducky? Hopefully, there's this. I actually will then pick up the rubber ducky. That'll actually help me because I'm feeling it. Feel like I'm connected to the rubber. I know this sounds ridiculous, but actually makes me feel like I'm connected to the rubber ducky a little bit. And then when I'm actually asking my question out loud, also feeling like an idiot, there's something that kicks in my brain. So for you, you just got to find out, okay, how am I going to apply these principles that have sort of been written about? Find your own personal tailoring that's going to fit you. That's the way I think. Yeah, cool, great question.
Hey, great talk. So I'm coming from a math education background, and so I guess when it comes to students who are, learning from an educator of some form, right? A lot of these methods are, I think, really key in the modern approaches to education. But when it comes to self-directed education, there's, I guess, a newer trend of, I guess, pop education in which people are seeing, let's say, the big rocks, and they're kind of meandering off into other kind of cross-disciplinary kind of educational methods. But it seems to be that there's a slight issue of like, how are people able to stay focused, stay concentrated on the actual goal of their self-directed education without having another individual there to help guide them, who has that, I guess, broader view. I guess, and especially for this context, a lot of people are going into this self-directed. So I guess what's your recommendation there?
So I think the key there is you have to have a problem that you personally care about. It isn't enough to just be told like, okay, here at work, here's what you're going to work on. I have a hard time getting motivated unless I need to learn that thing. Like I got into HTML back in the day because I really wanted to have a web page and I didn't know how to do that. And I had a couple friends at the time who had one, and I was like, I want that. And so for personal reasons, like I had to figure it out. That's the only thing that gave me the perseverance to get through all this crap of like learning the stupid HTML and CSS, because I had a personal need there was pain. I had to solve that problem. I think especially like, you mentioned math class, the Dan Meyer talk, he was teaching at the time, mostly he would be assigned like the remedial classes because he was a new teacher. And he's trying to get them to learn about, you got a volume of a tank and there's a hose filling up this tank. It's a typical textbook problem like nobody wants to solve, right? Like there's never a time in your life when you're going to have to calculate how long is this going to take? So what he did was he went out to his backyard with his little camera at the time, and he put a little hose trickling into this big bucket that he had. And he just videotaped like 4 minutes of this water dripping into this bucket. And then he shows it to his class. And his class is like dead bored, like, you're showing us this video. And finally, some kid says, how long is this going to take to fill up? And he's like, I had him. Right? He's like, well, we could figure it out. You can either watch the video and time it, or we could just do it with some math real quick. And now they were interested in like how they could get that answer. So I think the intrinsic motivation is like just key. Sorry, I could go on forever. Sorry for the long answer. Cool. Anything else? Bring it on.
I was just wondering, I read a book called How to Learn Math by Barbara Oakley. If you've read that book, it speaks a lot about how to learn. But part of the core concepts of the book is there's a focus in the fuse mode, so you learn when you're sleeping. So you probably already just know about that subject, but if you want to speak on it.
It was I learned this first from that Andy Hunt book. That your subconscious, like I don't believe in some of this weird subconscious stuff, but like it seems to be true. So the best example that I've been giving to the folks I work with is when you have a particularly hard problem, what I do is I work on the problem only long enough to get the ideas of the problem, the constraints of the problem into my head. But thinking about it more doesn't help. Right? If the answer does, if the solution doesn't present itself within a minute, it's a hard problem for me. And so what I do then is I just leave it. I get the problem enough into my head that I know my brain's going to work on it when I'm not thinking about it. Like have you ever had, you're taking a walk, you're going to the grocery store, you're in the shower, and you're like, oh, wait, I think this, right? You guys ever had that? Like out of the blue, you suddenly start to solve some problem that you were working on days ago. I think what's happening there, I started to believe what I'm reading here, that your brain has a way of still working on problems if it understands it enough. So I tend to first try to get into the problem enough to understand it, but not enough to get frustrated. And then I just sort of leave it. And sometimes in the next morning or something, you'll have an idea about how to go about that. But if I were to first try to attack that problem right then, it probably wouldn't be very fruitful. So my personal experience is that stuff is kind of true. Yeah, right on. Anything else? Yeah, Peter?
Yeah. So what's the plan? Apart of signing for a newsletter, reading the book, what do I do next? So how to find the right big stones, steps?
Some terrible writing in progress.
I already signed.
Yeah. Oh, you already signed up? Oh, okay, very good. Yeah. So at the HOM app, you could, if you want to read some, it'll be finished one day. Right now, you're seeing the sausage being made. But if you're curious, it'll always be a free and open site for the community. But yeah, so I'm sorry, I don't know if I understood your question.
Like what do I do next? Because yeah, learning is important. Obviously, we learn all our life, this job. So
What I always recommend to my students, which is you have to find a buddy who is also interested in this idea of trying to get better at like how to learn stuff. And most of my friends couldn't care less, right? But I have one or two people where we kind of like once in a while talking about these meta issues about our career and being able to talk with somebody else about it and get the feedback from them. That's what really kind of motivates me to kind of keep learning about it. So I think the best thing is see if you can find a friend here who's also interested, and maybe even before you leave tonight, be like, hey, let's just exchange emails or something, and I would love to just learn about it, or do a book club or something, or just find a book that's common and then talk about that chapter. I learned so much from just the interaction with other people, more than just from reading, by myself. That's why we're actually all here together, right? So.
great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Wow.
So, being in the college education system, I had some gripes that I had. I feel like for the first 22 years, people, they just study and, intellectual pursuits. And I feel like education should be more action-based. And I just think a lot of the kids, the first 22 years, they're in their head the whole time. Do you feel the same way with our educational system, that they're not teaching kids to take action and being just intellectual, or what do you think?
The silver lining with, I think, all this AI stuff hitting the education space, because believe me, there's a lot of English teachers right now stressed out about people turning in essays, right? I think that the silver lining is we're going to have to rethink the way we really do assessments of students and what activities are worth their time. The Ken Robinson TED Talk kind of was the first one to illuminate this for me, that in the United States, at least, it's mostly a post-war model for scalability for public school systems. So you got rows of desks, just like an assembly line, and you have the boss of the assembly line floor, the teacher, and it's a one-way conversation. And I think what's starting to happen now, I think maybe because of Khan Academy, there's starting to be some understanding of there should be a learning environment, not a teaching environment. And I think with technologies these days, we should be able to start to flip the scene a little bit and make sure that each student now has an environment for learning according to where they are. But the details are beyond me. I don't work enough in that K through 12 area to really know. But yeah, I completely agree that because I see it, I teach in the master's program at the University of Chicago, and I see students who are come in, now we're at the graduate level now, conditioned that they just have to know what is it that I'm saying that they're going to have to put on the test so they get the grade, and that the grade is superior to their learning almost. And as a department, we try to explain your grades are not that important. We want you to learn so that when you get on the job, you know what you're doing. But it's a battle, right? Because they've been conditioned for so long that the game in school is, okay, what is this dude talking about that I'm just going to have to regurgitate on some test to get to a piece of paper? And I think that those days are short-lived now, because with technology, we can't rely on the old tricks that we used to keep people in line. So yeah, I totally agree. It's a much short answer. Sorry for the long answer. Cool. Very good. Thank you so much.
Okay, we're gonna take like a 10, 15-minute bathroom break, whatever. Stretch out your legs while Brooke gets set up. Our second speaker.
There we go. Test, test, test. Let me share my screen here and see if video and audio look good. So here, let me go to the start. Hit play. There we go. There we go. Okay, so sound and audio sounds good. That's good. And then the slides take up the full screen then? I assume those look just fine too. Okay, sweet, sweet. All right, I'll just hide myself until you're ready.
Yeah. Hello? Oh, okay. We're gonna start in like a minute or two. If people in the back can hear me and like grab people who can't hear me back there, we're gonna start in like a minute. Thank you for grabbing, folks. My voice does not carry. Hello, we're gonna start in like a minute. Hopefully Brooke can hear me as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah. So we're gonna get started with our second talk. So Brooke, take it away.
Yeah, well, thanks, Michelle. And hello, everyone in Chicago. I can't see you, but it sounds like there's a decent crowd. So I wanted to talk about milestones and just share some knowledge and some of the work I've been doing, and hopefully get you excited about how to add some of this tooling and automation into your own process. So when I'm talking about milestones, before I get into that, I actually want to talk about versions, especially semantic versioning. So you'll notice here on the right, there's a patch version here, and it's in a green color, because patches are meant to be just fixes to the code base, right? When you release a patch release, it should not be a breaking change, and it should not be adding new functionality either. It's just meant to fix something. And that's why the green color is used, because it's meant to be pretty benign in nature. Then in the middle, you have a minor patch, which is in blue color. And that's meant to be that there's something being added, an addition being made to the software. Now, this might actually require changes on your part, but the cool thing with additions is that you get to them when you have time. It's not something you have to halt everything and fix right away in your code when you're upgrading. It's just something you can get to when you have time. And then finally, the major is always on the right-hand side here. It's in red color because usually when those comes out, there's usually a breaking change. It's something's changed to the software. Maybe there was deprecations earlier, and now those deprecations are completely removed. Maybe there's new configuration changes that you need to do. Something's got to grab your attention, and so that major version is really important. Now, when you have strong versioning like this, there's a nice sequential order to this. So if there's date time, there's always date time information around this. We'll get to this in a moment, but there's a nice sequential flow to this. Now, this isn't always true because as you release versions, you might be in the 1.0 version, but then you might have to do a patch to the 0.1 version, like 0.1.1. And that date time would actually be more in the future. But the sequence of the versions themselves, they're always sequential. And usually the date times follow, but that information is there if you need it. So all this boils down to major, minor, and patch information. And so I want to talk about that and kind of unravel that in this talk. And to do that, I'm going to kind of focus on two gems. They're open source gems that I've been maintaining for many years, actually over a decade, maybe 2 decades now. The Versionator gem and the Milestoner gem. And in the design of these gems in their logo, you'll notice the color coding there. They gel really well together. And so we're going to kind of break this down and show you how you can use some of this tooling in your own code. But before we get to that, now that you know about versioning, let's actually talk about the problem space a little bit. So there's 3 categories that I want to dive into. And we're going to spend most of our time in consistency, and then we'll finish up with the last 2, automation and communication. So when it comes to consistency, we can break this down further into 2 subcategories. There's versioning and there's release notes. And so I want to start with versioning first. So like I was saying, the Versionator gem is a gem that I maintain. And what's really nice about it is it gives you a version type in your Ruby code. It's really powerful. It's actually a whole value object. So the components, the digits that make it up, right? Those values are what gives it its identity, its comparison. It's not by its memory space in Ruby. It's not by the object ID. So it's a very, very powerful way to cast objects as versions and then be able to compare them and so forth. Now, the things that I've seen done wrong on many teams, and I want to point out here, is don't do this, but let's walk through it here really quickly. So I've seen a lot of teams use date time information for versioning. Well, first off, don't do that, because when you use get and you tag and you create your versions, that is metadata that Git saves for you anyway, so you can always pull that out at any time. You do not need to have this for version control. This is also terrible because it's also not in the same consistent format, which just wreaks havoc in being able to auto sort this, so don't do this. You can have the V prefix. It's actually kind of a legacy, I think, from, I want to say from the CVS days, like before SVN and before Git, where the version prefix was put on the beginning of a version to denote that it was a version. It's part of the specification, but you really don't need it. And I would argue that if you're doing this, just please get rid of it. It doesn't add any value. Getting rid of it doesn't take anything away. Sometimes teams do partial versioning information. That is totally not part of the specification, so don't do that. Some like to just mix it up and put date times in there. So please don't do that either. You can actually have pre-release and metadata information as part of the specification. We'll talk about this just a little bit more. It's not my favorite, but it is part of the specification and you can do it. And then finally, some teams, they just straight up don't have a scheme. They don't adhere to semantic versioning. They just write whatever they want for their versions. Also, please don't do that either. So the thing that's really bad about all this, when you sum it up, is that there's no chronological sorting to this. There's no way to alpha sort this. And when you have the strong semantic versioning that I was talking about earlier in the earlier slides, you'll see that it just sequentially, like you can auto sort that, and it's always the last version was always the latest one on the top. You can't get that with this kind of chaos. So before we go on, let's talk about pre-release and metadata, because I hinted at it and I want to dive into it. So pre-release information is what you see here. It's delimited by the hyphen. And anything you put after that is basically pre-release information before the 100 release goes out. It's part of the specification. I'm not terribly a fan of it because you can do it different ways. Like in Ruby, right, in our gem file, we can always point to a repository, we can point to a branch, we can point to a SHA. There's multiple ways and actually to be able to basically check out software before it's being released without having to add this additional complexity to your versioning. Again, it's not bad, it's just not terribly my favorite. The other part of the specification in semantic versioning is the metadata. And the metadata is denoted by the plus sign. And that is and it can be anything. And as you can see here, this is actually pretty hard to decipher, because usually what teams do when they use metadata like this is usually some cryptic code. And then you have to go and find the documentation to figure out how to decipher it and actually understand what it means. I'm not it's part of the specification, not a fan of it either. And you'll also notice that metadata can be combined with the pre-release information. So, the hyphen to denote the pre-release, and then you can put a plus for the metadata. Again, that all gets really complicated and it makes your versions look pretty gnarly. So not a huge fan of that either, even though it's part of the specification. So what I'm talking about here is actually strict semantic versioning, which is just the major, the minor, and the patch information. And when you have that, you can do some really nice things in Git in order to get that metadata out of your tags and display them. So in this case, I'm showing you basically a little bash script that I have locally that pulls out the metadata from Git. And I just ask it, hey, list all the tags for me and give me all the metadata. And this is all coming from Git, except for the statistics, like the commits, the deletions, and insertions, and so forth. That's actually being generated by Milestoner, but we'll talk about that just a little bit later. So the breakdown of this is when you have strict semantic versioning, is you have nice, have a nice sequential flow, right, on the left-hand side. Then you can have date time information. That comes from the tags itself in Git. And I'm just asking Git to format this for me. And so it just pulls out the tags of, or the date time of those tags. And then it has author information, so I don't have to get that anywhere. Git just has that. And then all the metadata comes from the Git trailers that are part of the tag. And we'll talk about that in just a moment, but all this metadata is being calculated when the version is created by Milestoner and then just put into the tag information so you can pull this out later. So really, really powerful. So what are Git tag trailers then? Well, they look like this. Basically, the specification for Git trailers is always a key value pair. It's always a key delimited by a colon and then the value. So in this case, what you're seeing is the metadata that Milestoner injects into your tags each time you create a release. And then you can ask it for that information later. It's all, again, it's just basically a hash at the end. And the trailer information always goes at the very bottom of your commit. So you have the subject, you have the body, which is why you're doing what you're doing, and then you put all your metadata, your trailer information at the bottom. And in my slides here, you'll notice that I'm kind of putting like links to articles and stuff at the bottom of the slides. I'll give these slides out later, but there's more information you can dig into later if you want to read a full article on this. I actually wish I had time to just talk about trailers because they're so much fun, but we don't have time for that now. So when you put this together, when I was listing out the metadata information here, the way I was doing this is through this command. Now, I know I can't hear anybody in the audience. There might be some shocks and gasps being like, well, that looks pretty cryptic, but actually it's quite simple. I'm just using git tag and I'm doing a list and then I'm color coding it and then I'm doing the formatting. The formatting is the more gnarly part of this. And then at the very end, I columnize it and I split it out by spaces. And that's what gives it a nice tabular layout. The formatting is actually in the documentation for Git, and all I'm really doing there, if you really kind of squint and look at it, it's just I'm starting a color like yellow, I'm putting in the ref name like short there, and then I'm doing a reset, and then I do it for all the other values that I'm trying to print out. I'm adding different colors for them, and that's it. It's a lot of noise of like opening the color and then resetting the color and so forth, but that's all that's happening there. So once you understand how that works, this actually becomes a lot easier to read. But again, we don't have time to go into this right now, but I'm just showing you the power of what you can do when you have trailers in your tags. You can also do trailers in your commits, but again, we don't have time to go through that now. So now that you understand how versioning works, let's actually dive into the release notes. So once you have versioning in place, this makes it really easy to generate your release notes and do it automatically. So the real thing that I'm getting at here that I'm trying to emphasize is that when you put this work up front, you have a nice way to fold this information into your commits. It really helps in code reviews, being able to have a really nice dialogue, be able to level other engineers up, be able to learn from other engineers. And then all that information feeds into building your actual versions and then also building the associated release notes that go with it. So the way to kind of look at this is to give you some examples of how other languages do the release notes. And I have 25 sort of criteria here. I'm not going to talk through all of these. I'm going to kind of walk you through them visually by kind of grouping them. And I want to start by basically looking at 3 different languages here. So we're going to dive into Node, Rust, and Ruby and see how they do. Now, again, this criteria is kind of criteria that I've built up over, a couple decades now, and constantly refining and making it better over the ages. But this is, so the criteria is definitely arbitrary, right? But I do think there's a lot of value here. So let me walk you through this. So we'll start with Node. And if we take an example here of Node, you'll see that this is kind of basically the release note pages that they generate with each release. And I want to break this down by criteria. Again, I won't walk through all of these, but we'll kind of highlight them by section. So if we start at the top, you'll see that Node lists the project and the version. It's got that silly V prefix there, not very useful. And current is nice, but it's not really necessary. But we do get to know who did the tagging. So in this case, Michael Azazo, which is great. But unfortunately, it's not a hyperlink. We can't actually click on his profile to actually learn more about him, or maybe you want to ask him questions about the release. So that's a bit of a bummer. In the middle, in kind of the top here, we have the logo, which is great. Definitely highly recommend always adding a logo to your project. but it repeats the information and it takes up a massive amount of size to list that. Next up, we have the version information all repeated again. It's kind of redundant, doesn't really need to be there. And then we have this sectioning here, and this is more freeform. And it's kind of arbitrary. Like with each new release, those sections can differ. Not necessarily a bad thing, but I don't think you really need it, because if you group your commits so that they're by category, like added, updated, deleted, whatnot, you can group that and you can actually have icons to kind of visually group them together and have some clarity as you're reading through the release notes. So not great. And then also here, the commit messages are part of the release notes. So on the plus side, it's really good that Node has direct links to the commits. I think that's fantastic. The only problem, though, is it's pretty cryptic. It actually doesn't read very well for humans. And part of the emphasis that I'm trying to do here is really trying to write commit messages in your release notes and everything that gets generated from that in a way that's pleasing for humans, because that's generally your audience. And granted, the metadata is there, like I was saying, in the Git trailers and so forth. So you can always have the machine read it, right? Totally cool. But you shouldn't have to force your human readers to read the actual release notes as a machine. That's just not fun for any of us. So it's great that the commit messages are here, but they're very cryptic. It's got the SHA in there. It's got this crazy doc colon tag here. It doesn't start as a proper sentence. The message itself reads kind of sort of, it's not really even a sentence really. But it's nice that you know that who the author is. In this case, Joy is the author. So great. But you also can't click on her either and actually check out her profile or be able to find information in order to talk to her. So kind of a bummer. So the score here for Node is a 9 out of 25. So 36%. We're not doing great. So let's move on and actually take a look at Rust. So with Rust, they're actually using basically GitHub's release manager for this. So these notes are kind of being built as releases on GitHub. So we'll walk through this again, and I won't go through heavy detail because we've talked about Node, and we can kind of run through this a little faster for Rust and Ruby. But the main thing here is at least Rust gets this right. You know that it's Rust, you know that a version, it doesn't have any of the prefixes. It's nice, strict semantic versioning, so it looks great. There's some additional metadata here. It's a little redundant, doesn't need to be there, but you can click on the Rust bot. You can actually link to the bot. You can see its profile. You can look at what it's done. So that's nice. There's categorization here. Again, I don't think you need it because you can do that through the commit messages themselves. And then the links here are actually to the code reviews. So in Node's case, right, we were linking to the commits. But in Rust's case, we're linking to the code reviews. I actually think this is the worst because it's not the code reviews that I'm interested in. It's actually the commit messages. Code reviews are nice, and you should actually have a link to the code review if you want to dive into it, but it shouldn't be the first thing that you go to. So a bit of a bummer there in terms of Rust. So in their scoring in this case, it's 5 out of 25. So 20%, we're sliding down the scale here. So let's wrap this up and take a look at Ruby now, our favorite language. So again, with Ruby, they do some wacky things. But in this case, they are basically using GitHub releases once again, but they're doing it slightly different. The first thing up top is, I think they corrected this, and now I think they're lapsing back. And so they're doing versions with the V in front, but then they do underscores. It's sort of almost nonsensical. But I think they fixed it at one point, and then they went back to this. So I'm not really sure what's going on there, but it's not pleasing to the eye. Then you have the bot information. So same thing as Rust. We won't get into that. Kind of the same thing. They have some sectioning here, not terribly great. But then what they do different from Rust and from Node is they link straight to the issue. So now you have even more work because you gotta link to the issue, which is Redmine. Then you got to track down on GitHub to see where the code review might be. And then you got to dive in to get to the commits so you can actually look at the code, the actual change. So you've got multiple levels that you got to dig through here. So unfortunately, and then finally, there's kind of a summary of the changelog of the version information here. That's fine, but not terribly useful. So the scoring, unfortunately, for our favorite language is 3 out of 25, so 12%. So not doing great as Rubyists. So if we look overall, right, the total scoring here is kind of just cascades down, and we're at a failing across all 3 of these projects. So let me talk about the solution here a little bit. So with Milestoner, like I was saying before, you can generate all this, and it can give you that kind of consistency and that automation that you might be yearning for or don't have or wish you had. So what this looks like is this. This is an HTML output that's generated by Milestoner, and it outputs pleasing release notes so that you can actually dive into all these details, but also see things at a high level and then dive into them much deeper. So let's look at the criteria on this. So pretty good. Now, there's a little warning there for code reviews because I haven't been able to spend time to actually wire in the automation for dealing with the various source code repositories. So that's why it's a yellow. What I mean by that is when you're dealing with like GitHub, Bitbucket, name your different kinds of source code repositories. They all generally have an API. And you need to actually have an API client that can actually tap into those to basically associate the commit to the code review and so forth, pull that back, and then be able to link to it. So I've got some of that working, but I need to roll out more of that in future releases. But with that aside, everything else looks pretty nice here, at least I think so. And you can also customize this too. Like what you're seeing is how Milestoner does it by default, but all the templates are there so that you can just totally customize as you see fit. But let's start from the top though. So one of the things I was complaining about in the other languages, you can see at the top that we have the logo, we have a version link, we can go back and look at previous versions. This is something that actually Node does really well. I didn't highlight it, but it actually does allow you to go back and forth through versions, which I think is great. So Milestoner does that too. You also have a link to the project itself, you know the version, and you know the date the date at least. Then you have author information. The author is linked to. You can tell it is a secure tag, so it's been cryptographically signed by me using my GPG key. And if you were to click on that, I'm not going to show it in these slides, but if you click on it, you would actually get that signature, and you'd see that I'm verified, which is great. Then you can also see that you can click on the commits themselves. So when you click on them, you actually get all that detail I was telling you about before. You get to see the commit message. You get to see the body. It's completely formatted. What I mean by that is you can see there's like a code snippet there. And that's because I'm writing usually in ASCII doc format in my Git commit messages. But it does, Milestoner does support Markdown if you like Markdown better. And what that does is it just renders all that information when you generate the release notes here. So that's really nice. Also, there's author information. If there was collaborators or signers, that would all be there. You can see that my Git signature is good. If you were to click on it, it would also show you my SHA for that as well. And then there's date time information. And then again, there's some categorization here. You can see that there's like symbols for plus for added changes, things that were updates, things were fixed, things were removed, and so forth. And the removed has like that little red icon there with a white center. And then finally, you get statistical information at the end, because again, Git is quite powerful. It has a ton of information about your commits, the time you spent on them, and so that can get generated into your release notes. And the way that works is when you create the tag, Milestoner is calculating the time from the first commit to the time to the last commit, and then that's how it shows how many days, hours, minutes, and seconds went into that release. And then there's some nice statistical information at the bottom, like how many commits, how many files changed, deletions, insertions, and so forth. And the nice thing is I always try to highlight the deletions are green because, as we all know, no code is always the best code, and the second best is actually deleting more code than you're actually adding. Now, that's not always true, but if you can be doing a lot more deleting, a lot of refactoring, and cleaning up the code base, those are always a joy. So that's kind of the overview for Milestoner there. And then also, like I said at the bottom, there's information so you can go backwards and forwards in times and look at the different versions. So that's just a nicety as well. So the score on this is 98%, doing pretty good. And like I said, it doesn't have the linking fully automated for the source code linking, but it can be added in, and I'm definitely one of the things that I'm still working on. So I was talking about the web format, which you've seen right here, but there's multiple other formats that you can generate in Milestoner as well, which is ASCII doc format. So in this case, I'm not showing you the generated ASCII doc format for the release notes, mainly because that's not as fun to look at. I'm just using my browser to render it. So what you're seeing is the rendered output of that ASCII doc. Now, you'll notice it's not quite as fancy as the HTML version because ASCII doc and Markdown and so forth, you can't really add on all the styling. So it's a pretty good layout, but it's there if you need it. You can also do feed and syndication. So one of the things I do with my projects is I'm generating the web format, as you saw, but I'm also generating the syndicated feed, because then anybody can go to my site or internal projects or whatever, and they can subscribe to that syndicated feed, and then they just get updates. So their feed reader does all the work for them, lets them know when a new release comes out, and then they can kind of get this view that you see here. Now, the layout that I'm using for this is actually NetNewsWire. If you've ever used it, it's for Mac OS, but it's free. And I'm just showing you the visual UI that it provides. But you'll notice that the layout and the information is still there, a little different than the web format, but you can still click on the commit messages. You can look at all the details that went into it. It's all there. And then you can also just link straight to the HTML version too. Then you can also do Markdown. In this case, I'm rendering it using the Marked 2 app on Mac OS. Again, not as much fun to look at the raw Markdown, but just showing you what it looks like when you render it. And then finally, if you just straight up don't care about any of that, because Milestoner is a command line interface, you can just stream the stuff from your console. So you can ask Milestoner to be like, hey, show me what the release notes are for the upcoming release, or maybe show me all the releases or all the versions, and you can look at that and scroll through it in your console. And that's color-coded as well. So when you put this all together, you actually have a really powerful tool in which to actually produce output in different formats that might be very pleasing or useful for the different types of audience, stakeholders or whatnot that need this information as part of the output of the work that you're doing on the project that you're doing. So if we go back to the categories here, we spent a lot of time on consistency. So let's actually kind of move into automation and communication, which are the other two problem areas that having good semantic versioning and good automation behind can help you with. So first off, in automation, what I want to talk about is kind of the architecture at a higher level just a little bit. We won't spend a lot of time going into the weeds, but I do want to share some of this with you because I think it's really interesting in terms of design and what you can do as a Ruby gem within the Ruby ecosystem. So Milestoner consists of a bunch of gems, and these gems are actually all open source as well. I actually maintain all of these. But the thing that I'm trying to point out is not to overwhelm you with like, whoa, there's a lot of stuff going on here. What I'm trying to emphasize is these are nice, highly specialized objects, you know, kind of like the single responsibility principle in solid design. They do one thing and they do it really well. And that makes this really powerful, in which you can use these components in other different types of architectures, different apps, different gems. Because they're done really well, it makes it possible so that I can build just the scaffolding that I need on top to deliver automation through Milestoner. So just wanted to share that as something, if you've not done a lot of this, it's a really powerful way to build CLIs. The other thing I want to emphasize here is it's also using Hanami views. So I'm a big Hanami guy. I basically spend all my working hours working in Hanami and getting paid to work building out Hanami. Not Hanami itself, but building web apps on top of Hanami. So sorry about that. I should correct myself. But the really cool thing about Hanami's architecture is it's the same way that I like to design and build applications in Ruby, which is small things that do things really well. And Hanami views, even though it's the view layer of the Hanami web framework, it's extremely powerful standalone. Like, you don't have to have all this weird wiring and goofiness that you have, like if you try to tear apart Rails and break it down that way. It usually, once you bring in part of Rails, you end up bringing in the whole thing. And Hanami is not built that way at all. It's a really clean architecture in that regard. So Milestoner sits on top of that. And then also it pulls in the runcom and X2G gems. So I was showing you the X2G stuff earlier, and I wish we had more time to talk about it. But the reason I bring this up is that X2G is a really good specification for organizing your dot files. So it gives you a way within your dot files on your Unix system, Linux system, Mac OS, to where you can have configuration logic, cache logic, state, and data logic. And X2G provides a specification for that. And so the X2G gem that I maintain actually allows you to have that in your Ruby code. And then the runcom gem sits on top of that so that you can have this really wonderful way to have configuration logic and configure Milestoner at a global level and then at a local project level. So what I mean by that is if you've done a lot of work with Git, you'll know that you can have a global Git configuration and then all your projects will inherit that configuration. But you can also specify a local configuration that's just specific to your project that overrides the global specification. So that's all that runcom's doing. And what I'm saying here essentially is that Milestoner allows you to have, you can set it globally for all your projects, or you can dial it down per project. And again, that's not Milestoner doing it. I'm just delegating to the X2G specification for that. So that's kind of the architecture there. Now, where this leads to then is, now that you kind of understand the underpinnings and stuff and how Milestoner works and release notes and so forth, there's a nice workflow to this. And what I mean by is there's the Caliber gem. This is a gem I use in all my projects. It's basically kind of an umbrella project that pulls in a bunch of Rubicop projects to make sure that I always have consistent styling, linting, performance checks, you name it. There's just a ton of stuff you can do in the Rubicop ecosystem, and Caliber pulls all that in. And then in order to keep my Git commit messages really, really consistent, high quality, good subjects, good bodies, good Git trailers, all that stuff, I want that linted, and I want that consistent too, because that's going to flow into those release notes. So Git lint comes into the picture. Then you can spin up any project you want. So again, using one of my gems like RubySmith, if you want to spin up a Ruby project that has all this stuff built in for you, you could use RubySmith. You can use GemSmith to build up a gem that has all this stuff baked in for you. Or you can use HanamiSmith to build up a Hanami application, a web application that has all this built in for you. Now, at the end, then that all feeds in. So as you're working on any of these projects, that feeds into Milestoner to build those release notes. So when you distill that down, no matter what path you take, you're basically got your project here in kind of the middle that's sitting between the inputs and the outputs. And basically on the left-hand side, you have your quality control, so you don't have this garbage in, garbage out problem. And then on the right-hand side, you have your deployment. And that's where Milestoner kind of fits into this picture. So when I was talking about the Git commits, let's take just a little bit of a little moment here to actually talk about that. So, when you make your Git commit like this, you're doing Git commit, and then you're adding your subject, so you know what it is that you're adding. And then you're going to follow up with your body. It's the why, and that's really critical to explain why you're doing what you're doing. Now, like I said earlier, this helps in the code review process. It helps in the education of others. It helps you when you're like 6 months to a year down the road and you're trying to remember what your thought process was at the time that you made this commit. Now you can go back in time. You can have that conversation with yourself. And then finally, the trailer information. So in this case, I'm saying, hey, this work that I'm doing is related to issue 123, and that'll eventually get linked when the release notes get built. And then finally, you can put in milestone information. So what I mean here is you're either going to say minor, patch, or major, and then Milestoner will calculate that all up when you're doing your release, so you don't have to think about any of this. And whatever the highest bump that you're doing, it'll calculate what your current version is and then bump that. So let's actually walk through this visually, how this is happening. Because I think this is pretty cool when it comes to version bumping and automation in this regard, because you don't have to think about this. You don't have to have this discussion at the time of release. You can do it during the code review process. So let's walk through this. So let's say that you have version 000, and you've made 3 commits, and each one has just a milestone trailer of milestone patch. So in that case, when the next version gets calculated, Milestoner is just going to look at all those commits and say, hey, the highest one here is a patch. So the version I'm going to bump to is just a 001. Now, let's say that 001 comes out, and you'll notice that these are all patches. I'm using the same color coding here, the green, because again, we're just fixing something in this case. But let's say that that version's out, and then you make 3 more commits. And this time you have a couple more patches, but that third commit is actually a minor commit. So in that case, it's going to bump to a minor version. And then let's say that you're working all along and you've got 3 more commits. And this time you have a minor change, you have a patch, but you also have a major. So we're going to move from that version of 010 to 100 because one of your commits in all that series of commits of work that you did from the previous tag, it has a major bump in there. And so Milestone is going to calculate that for you. And again, this is really nice because it's built into the code review, it's built into your work, and the final work of actually having to spend time building out release notes, figuring out where your next tag is, like you don't have to think about that anymore. And so that's all handled here through the trailers. So when you put all that together, then that means that when you're sitting at the command line then and you're using Milestoner, you can ask it to build in those various formats. So when I was showing you earlier the UI for that, it's just a command line that's just saying, hey, format this as a string and let me see it in the console. Or maybe render it as ASCII doc, or maybe as Markdown, or in the web format, or in the feed format. And in this case, the feed format, you can do a max on any one of these formats. But I'm doing 10 because when you build a syndicated feed, you usually want to see like the last 10 versions. You don't want it to always just be like one entry in your feed. That's not terribly exciting for people subscribed to your site. So having at least a minimum of 10, you can make it higher if you want, but 10's a good minimum. So then when you're done with all that and you've looked at the release notes, you build them, you looked at them locally, they look great, there's nothing more that you want to add, all you have to do is publish, and then Milestoner will build the tag for you, build in all of the trailer information into your tag, and then push that up for you, push up the tag and everything else. So that is automation. That's the automation piece. So let's wrap this up then and talk about the last piece, communication. So when you put all this together, it's really nice because, you know, as engineers, we're doing a lot of work. We're working on issues. We've got code reviews. We've got source control to deal with. We've got continuous integration, waiting for those builds and so forth. And then at the very end, you know, we don't really want to be rolling up our sleeves and having to be like, okay, I have to halt everything and figure out how to generate those release notes or deal with the deployment. I really want this to be automated. And then with all that together, right, that's a whole lot of communication. And so we're already busy enough as engineers. So being able to have this portion of communication dialed down so that we have to do less is actually a really good thing. So Milestoner sits right into that, right after the continuous integration portion of this, where it just reduces that communication down. You still have to talk to all your stakeholders, other engineers, other teams, and so forth. But you don't have to do it yourself. You don't have to be messaging or running around doing that. You just let Milestoner build that. That gets published. If you're using syndicated feeds, they just tune into that. That part is just all done for you. So that's really nice. So that's kind of, at a high level, that's kind of what Milestones, versioning, using Milestoner, and all this is about, is being able to reduce this down so that you have more consistency, automation, and communication at the end of the day. So that's my talk on Milestones. I hope you enjoyed it. You can find me here. The slides are here if you want to dive into any of this. I have a community if you want to hang out. I think communities are kind of old school these days because I don't have a lot of people hanging out there, but it's always open. So if you have questions, you want to dive into this, I'm happy to talk about this more, but it's there. So anyway, thanks. I hope this was fun. And yeah, just let me know if you guys want to have any questions or anything I can dive into for you.
Thanks, Brooke. Do we have any questions, especially online? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess a common use for the pre-release aspect of the semantic version is for particular types of projects that have, let's say, certain dependencies, like for example, have like long-term support, like an LTS version, or they're maintaining multiple versions at the same time, is primarily used for like release candidates. So I guess in this system, if someone has to do this type of workflow in which they're maintaining multiple versions, they need to have like release candidates before they can actually do full releases. Is there, I guess, is that a part of kind of the automation workflow as well that you can do, or what's, I guess, your recommendation there?
Yeah, so and that's a fair point. Yeah, in more complex, larger kind of enterprisey stuff, you might actually, that's where the part of the specification for pre-release information, it can be quite useful. My argument's always been like, if you can, try to push for being able to like always have like main green and allow people to actually pull that in if they need to, right? Because you can do that at any time. You don't need the pre-release to do that. It doesn't really matter what project you're on. You can always grab that if you need to, if you're ready to roll up your sleeves and do that. But with Milestoner, it doesn't really support that because in the versionaire gem, it uses strict semantic versioning. So it doesn't actually, it doesn't allow you to have pre-release or metadata information. So that's just not supported. Just because it's never been my workflow, and I've never actually had to ever use that in teams that I've worked on. But so if you're in that situation where you need that kind of support at the very big, major enterprise level, then this solution wouldn't quite work for that.
Any other questions? Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Brooke. Oh,
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm like, hello. Yeah. I think if you have anything else, we have like 10, 15 minutes, but I also have some closing and then open forum for anyone who wants to make an announcement. Excuse me. Cool. Okay. So I'm going to open up the floor for anyone who has announcements for our community right here, anyone who's here. I think Barry in the back had something to share. So if you don't mind coming up. Excuse me.
New to Ruby. Talking to folks, very interesting. I like Jeff's talk. Versioning is something I don't have to deal with. So I wanted to just let you know about this project I'm involved in. If any of you are Rubyists who might be interested in some civic activism, maybe this might be for you. Decidem is this online platform for community decision-making that was developed in Barcelona on Ruby on Rails, using Ruby on Rails like 10 years ago. And became real popular in Barcelona. It's currently used in a few hundred cities around the world. I've been interested in Decidem for like 5 plus years. And, thinking, well, Decidem would be an interesting thing to set up in Chicago. I don't know if you know, but every ward goes through a participatory budgeting well, it's more than an exercise. So each ward, alderman gets $1 million every year that can be allocated by ward residents. And so currently this is done in in-person meetings. The Decidem approach has allowed this type of process to take place online. It's not just for budgeting, it's for community decision-making, other things like that. And so the co-op I work with, Tri-Commons, is interested in trying to bring online participatory budgeting to Chicago. And we're also interested in developing a version of Decidem that can be used with some organizations that we work with. So basically online organizations like, I don't know if you might be familiar with Next System, but it's a national group of people that are working for progressive change to bring about the next system. And there's the next system group in Chicago, and they're very interested in trying to get the CDM version going. So yes, so that's the CDM. And the CDM is written in Ruby on Rails. We currently, on our VPS, have a version of the CDM going, and I'm the principal person working with it. My knowledge of Ruby in Rails is about 2 months old. And so we're interested in getting other people involved who maybe have deeper background with Rails. And besides coming here, ChiCommons is pretty closely associated with ChiHacknight, if some of you might be familiar. And we're thinking in terms of possibly developing a civic project through ChiHacknight around bringing Ruby on Rails to Chicago, bringing the CDM to Chicago. So that is my announcement. If you're interested or have any questions, please step up and introduce yourself.
Hey, thank you so much, Barry. Okay. Yeah, sometimes it does take some time for everything to like sit. If anyone has questions for Brooke, he's still around. Do you mind actually putting up your contact info just one more time in case people want to reach out to you after?
Sorry about that.
Yeah. All right. But yeah, with that being said, I think there's still some pizza left. And then if anyone else has anything else to say, floor is yours. Other than that, we're done. See you next month.